All right, so you know how things in the Middle East, they always seem to be like simmering, kind of bubbling away there, never quite quiet. Well, recently things have really heated up. It's more like a rolling boil now.
Yeah.
And there's this one move the U.S. military's made that's, well, it's caught my attention, that's for sure. They've sent A-10 Thunderbolt 2 sets back into the mix.
Warthogs.
Exactly, the Warthogs. And that feels very deliberate, like a specific response to the latest developments and especially all the trouble with the Houthi rebels.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just your routine troop rotation or anything like that. This deployment kicked off around March 29th, 2025. And we're not just talking planes here. Over 300 airmen from the Idaho Air National Guard's 124th Fighter Wing, they're all heading to the U.S. Central Command, CNTCOM, Area of Responsibility. And this comes right on the heels of confirmation that B-2 Spirit stealth bombers are setting up shop at Diego Garcia. It all points to a pretty significant shift in how the U.S. is posturing its forces in the region, given the current climate.
Yeah, you're right. And while the official word on the mission is probably locked down tight, it doesn't take a military strategist to start connecting the dots.
No.
The A-10, it's built for close air support. That's its bread and butter. So with all the Houthi activity going on, it seems pretty likely that those Warthogs are there to bring some serious firepower to the fight against them.
I think that's a safe bet.
So for this deep dive on the Military Breakdown podcast, we're going to break down this A-10 deployment. We'll look at what makes this aircraft so unique, how it fits into the bigger picture of the U.S. military's presence in the Middle East, and what this whole thing might be signaling to everyone else out there watching.
Sounds good.
So first, let's get a handle on what the A-10 Thunderbolt 2, the Warthog, actually is.
Right.
It's not like your sleek, super fast fighter jet. It's a whole different animal, right?
It really is. Purpose-built for one job, close air support, getting down and dirty, supporting troops on the ground. And when you look at it, its design, what it can do, you see why it's got such a reputation, Respected, but also feared.
Feared for sure. And the first thing that pops into my head is that massive gun, that GAU-8 Avenger 30-millimeter rotary cannon. Talk about firepower.
Oh, yeah.
It's meant to tear through tanks, blast apart bunkers, anything on the ground. And the rate of fire, up to 3,900 rounds per minute. That's just an insane amount of lead flying downrange.
It is. And you're right. It's designed to shred through armor. Not just the amount of rounds, but the sheer force of those big bullets hitting their target. But what's also amazing is how tough the A-10 is. Built to take a hit and keep flying. The pilot's protected by this titanium armor, like a bathtub, they call it.
Right.
It's meant to withstand ground fire. Plus, redundant flight systems, backups for everything important. So even if it takes some damage, the pilot has a good chance of bringing it home. They really put a lot of thought into keeping those crews safe while delivering that devastating firepower.
And it seems like it doesn't need a perfect runway, like some of those other jets, right? I've read about them operating from pretty rough airstrips. What's the advantage of that, especially in a place like the Middle East?
That's a huge advantage, tactically speaking. You're not always going to have these big established air bases available. And even if you do, they might be targets themselves. So the A-10, it can take off and land from these shorter, rougher airstrips, austere airfields, they call them, meaning it can get closer to the action, closer to the troops that need its support. That means faster response times, more flexibility for commanders on the ground. It's about getting that firepower where it's needed, even when things are messy logistically.
So it's a tough plane. It's got that monstrous cannon, and it can operate from almost anywhere. But it also has all those hard points, right? I think 11?
11 hard points, yep.
That's a lot of options for carrying other weaponry.
It really is. Those hard points let the A-10 carry all sorts of different munitions. We're talking AGM-65 Maverick missiles. Those are good for taking out bigger, more significant targets. It can carry a whole range of precision-guided bombs so you can really hit what you're aiming at. And then there's the unguided rockets for when you need to suppress an area. It's a real workhorse in that close air support role. Can be adapted to whatever the mission needs.
And what's really interesting is what we're seeing on these A-10s that have just arrived, the specific weapons they're carrying. It gives us a little peek into what they might be expecting to face.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So what sticks out to you?
Well, it's a mix of being able to defend itself and being able to strike targets with pinpoint accuracy. On the outer pylons, they've got AM-9 Sidewinder air-to-air missiles. Now, the A-10 is not built for dogfighting, but those Sidewinders, they're there to give it a way to protect itself if something tries to take it out of the sky, so it can stay focused on its ground attack mission.
Makes sense. It's got to be able to look after itself. And then moving in, you see those 7-shot, 70-millimeter rocket pods. But they're not just your basic unguided rockets, right? The reports are that they could be loaded with the Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System, APKWS-2, specifically with the M282 penetrating warheads, the ones with the yellow base and the red band. That's pretty specialized.
It is. The APKWS-2, it basically turns those dumb rockets into these really accurate laser-guided weapons. And the M282 warhead, that's meant to punch through light armor, even some structures. So the A-10s, they can go after lighter vehicles, targets inside buildings, without causing as much collateral damage as you would with bigger, less precise bombs. We're talking serious accuracy here. In some cases, they could even use it against individuals, like in a doorway or something, if the targeting systems can get a lock.
Wow. That's almost surgical.
Mm-hmm.
And then under the other wing, you've got those Lightning Advanced Targeting Pods. Those are like the eyes of the aircraft, right?
Absolutely. The Lightning Pod is the A-10's main way of seeing what's happening on the ground, finding and tracking threats. And it can do it in real time, using electro-optical and infrared imagery. The infrared's especially useful at night, or if the weather's bad. They use the laser designator in the pod to paint targets for those laser-guided weapons, and the rangefinder gives them the distance to the target. It can also figure out precise GPS coordinates, which they can then feed to GPS-guided bombs for those super accurate hits. It's the key to that precision engagement capability.
So it's not just brute force. It can be pretty subtle when it needs to be.
Right.
And then we get to the heavy hitters, the racks carrying 4 GBU-39B small-diameter bombs, SDBs, under the wings. They're not huge, just 250 pounds each, but they're GPS-guided, and they've got those pop-out wings for extra range. Over 40 nautical miles, I think.
Yeah, that's right. That standoff range, that's important because the A-10 can hit targets from further away so it doesn't have to fly right into the teeth of enemy air defenses. The SDBs are also very accurate thanks to that GPS guidance. We don't know for sure which specific type they're using, but it's possible they've got the GBU-39AB Focused Lethality Munition, the FLM. That one's designed to cause as little collateral damage as possible, especially in cities or towns. But even the standard STB packs a good punch for its size.
And lastly, we see those pairs of 500-pound JDAMs hanging under the fuselage, including the laser JDAM variant, the LJDAM.
Yep. JDAMs, those are basically regular bombs that have been upgraded with a GPS guidance kit. The laser JDAM, that one adds a laser seeker on the front, so it's got 2 ways to find its target. It can use GPS to hit something that's stationary, but if the target's moving, or if they're not sure about the exact GPS location, they can use that laser seeker to guide it in right at the end. So between the missiles for self-defense, those super accurate APKW-S2 rockets, the targeting pod, the SDBs with their long range, and the bigger JDAMs with GPS and laser guidance, these A-10s are incredibly versatile. They're ready for pretty much anything.
Okay, so we've got a good idea of what these Warthogs bring to the table. Now let's zoom out a bit. Why are they being sent to CENTCOM right now?
Okay.
We talked about the Houthi rebels in Yemen. That seems to be the main reason, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. Since about mid-March 2025, the U.S. has launched over 200 airstrikes against Houthi targets, their infrastructure, their leaders. This is a direct response to the Houthis ramping up their attacks on international shipping in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. Plus, they're supporting all these other Iranian-backed groups in the region, so the U.S. is trying to take away their ability to attack and hopefully make them think twice about doing it again.
And this A-10 deployment, it's not just a one-time thing, is it? It seems like it's part of a larger buildup of U.S. military power in the area.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. We've also seen the USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group sent to the region, joining the USS Harry S. Truman Carrier Strike Group, which was already there.
Yeah.
Having 2 carrier strike groups operating together, that's a pretty big show of force. And then, like we said before, those B-2 Spirit bombers arriving at Diego Garcia, that adds a whole other dimension of long-range strike capability.
Diego Garcia. Now, that's a strategically important place out in the Indian Ocean, about 2,200 miles from Yemen, right?
About that, yeah.
And the B-2, it can fly for something like 6,000 nautical miles without refueling. That means it can pretty much reach anywhere in the region without having to stop for gas. It's a real force multiplier.
Exactly. Diego Garcia is a safe, secure base for those bombers, and it gives them a straight shot at potential targets in Yemen, or even further away if they need to. Sending those B-2s, it shows how seriously the U.S. is taking this situation. They're not messing around.
It really does. Now, this isn't the 124th Fighter Wing's first deployment to this part of the world, is it? The A-10s and their crews, they've got quite a history in Southwest Asia.
Oh, yeah. They've been a workhorse in the Middle East for years. Back in 2020, they were deployed for Operation Freedom Sentinel in Afghanistan. That was all about counterterrorism and training Afghan forces. And before that, 2016, they were heavily involved in Operation Inherent Resolve, going after ISIS in Iraq and Syria. And even before that, they were part of Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, Southern Watch. So this is just the latest chapter in a long story for them.
And the A-10 specifically, it seems like they've been calling on it more and more in recent years to bolster air power in the Middle East.
Yeah, even after that Hamas attack on Israel in October 2022, which really destabilized things, we saw A-10 deployments in March 2023 and again in October 2024. Sometimes they were working alongside F-16s and F-15Es. There was even a reported incident in November of last year where an A-10 took out a group of militants who were about to launch rockets at an American position. And right before this latest deployment, the Air Force released pictures of A-10s doing what they called presence patrols in the Middle East. Just a reminder that they're there and they're watching.
So they've been keeping busy even before this latest escalation. And we can't forget about their role in the fight against ISIS, especially in Iraq and Syria.
You're right. Between November 2024 and January 2025, A-10s flew in a bunch of missions against ISIS targets in those countries. Yeah. And as recently as late December, probably 2024, they were providing air support to troops on the ground who were fighting ISIS in those tough, mountainous areas of Iraq. So even though everyone's focused on the Houthis right now, the A-10 is still a key player in dealing with those other threats that are still simmering in the Middle East.
It's interesting, isn't it? They're sending more and more A-10s to the region, but at the same time, there was talk a couple years ago about the U.S. maybe reducing its presence there, especially when it comes to advanced combat aircraft. If I remember correctly, the plan was to swap out some of those high-end jets with A-10s. It was part of a bigger shift towards focusing on Europe and the Pacific.
You're remembering right. There was definitely a change in thinking going on. The Biden administration, they figured the Middle East was becoming more stable, not as much of an immediate concern compared to what Russia and China were doing. I think Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, summed it up pretty well right before the Hamas attack in 2023. He said the Middle East was quieter than it has been for decades.
Which, looking back now, seems a little optimistic, to say the least.
Yeah.
Because now we're seeing the opposite. They're not pulling back. They're sending more forces, not just carriers, but those really valuable B-2 bombers, too, all because of the Houthis and the ongoing problems with Iran. That has to have some impact on how the U.S. spreads out its military resources, right? And its ability to keep China in check over in the Pacific.
It definitely does. Every time you send something like a carrier strike group or a B-2 bomber to one part of the world, it means you have less of those things available somewhere else. It shows the tough choices the U.S. has to make, trying to keep up with all these different problems popping up around the world. Resources are limited, and when you have to focus on one area, it creates gaps somewhere else.
And this is all happening while the U.S. Air Force is planning to retire the A-10 altogether. The phase-out is supposed to start next fall, 2026, with the whole fleet gone by 2028. And the 124th Fighter Wing, they're scheduled to switch to F-16s beginning in spring 2027. They're just waiting on an environmental impact study.
It's kind of ironic, right? Here's this plane that's actively being deployed to deal with a real and growing threat. Clearly shows it's still got something to offer. But at the same time, they're getting ready to get rid of it. It tells you just how irreplaceable the A-10 is for close air support and how tough it's going to be for the Air Force to find something that can do the same job.
So just to be clear, geographically speaking, these A-10s are being sent to the U.S. Central Command, CETOM, area of responsibility. What parts of the world does that cover exactly?
CECOM, that covers a huge and really important chunk of the globe, the Middle East, parts of North Africa, Central and South Asia. In this particular situation, we've been talking about a few key spots. The Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, that's where the Houthis have been hitting ships. Then there's Yemen itself, where the Houthis are based. The Eastern Mediterranean, that's where those U.S. carrier strike groups have been operating. And Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, which is a vital forward base for those long-range assets like the B-2s. All those places, they all fall under CENTCOM.
Okay, so to sum it all up, the U.S. is sending a significant number of A-10 Warthogs to the Middle East, specifically to the CENTCOM area. They're there to deal with the Houthi rebels in Yemen, who have become a bigger and bigger problem. These A-10s, with their unique capabilities and the specific weapons they're carrying, they're going to be a major boost to the fight against the Houthis. This is all part of a larger effort by the U.S. to increase its military presence in the region. They're sending 2 carrier strike groups, and they've got those B-2 stealth bombers at Diego Garcia. And what's really interesting is that they're doing all this with the A-10, even though there was talk of reducing advanced aircraft in the region, and even though the Air Force is planning to retire the whole A-10 fleet in the next few years.
Right. It shows how things can change so quickly. Military deployments, they have to adapt to what's happening in the world. And sometimes you need specific tools for specific jobs, even if the long-term plan is to do things differently.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the A-10 deployment here on the Military Breakdown podcast, I want to leave you with a question to think about. Why are they sending these particular aircraft with their unique design and capabilities to this region right now? What does it tell us about what the U.S. military is most worried about in the Middle East? And how are they thinking about using different types of aircraft to handle those threats? It's a complex situation, and this deployment is a big piece of the puzzle.
It really is.
We'll have to see how it all plays out.